Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Greystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Greystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongreystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. Hope you've had a good week so far. And this is the second episode of 2020, the new decade. And if it's the first time you're listening, I do highly recommend you go back to episode 1. I know there's people that kind of listen to the most update version or the most kind of recent episode. With this podcast, I highly recommend you go back to episode 1 because this is the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation, and I've kind of taken you on a journey through the steps of which I took to create my own financial independence. So bit by bit through those episodes is everything that I've done to get to where I am, and it's kind of a journey in order of process. So highly recommend you go back. Having said that, we've come into 2020, and I kind of want to, we delved deep last year, okay? We covered off a lot. We covered a lot of ground. And this year, we kind of started last week by talking about reviewing the year just gone. So we're almost starting again, and we've reviewed the year just gone. If you haven't listened to that episode, go and listen to that before you listen to this one. But I thought it'd be good to kind of use this episode as a way to put a stake in the ground for everything going forward for this year, okay? And I want to kind of reset your mind in some ways here, because I was in a meeting last night with my mentor, Dr. John Demartini. I was privileged enough to have a Zoom call meeting with him for an hour, and we covered a lot of ground in that meeting as well. And one of the things we were talking about a lot is, good and bad. We was talking about what people perceive to be good and what people perceive to be bad. And if we want to achieve financial independence or financial freedom or independence in any, just in life, to live a free life, an independent life and an inspiring life, what we need to do is understand that there's a ton of beliefs and societal kind of idealisms and social idealisms and things that are portrayed as positive and things that are portrayed as negative and things that are portrayed as good, things that are portrayed as bad and evil. And what you need to understand is up until this point, all of that has just been made up. Okay, it was someone's decision to say what's good and what's bad. And throughout the ages, that's what it is. Everyone has kind of come up with these, that's good, you mustn't do that. That's bad, you must do that. You mustn't do that, or that's good, you must do that. You must follow these guidelines. You must not follow those guidelines, and then prison and all the kind of, obviously to protect against crime and hurt against other humans and all that kind of stuff, right? But everything that's perceived to be good and kind of beliefs that things are good are just based off of what someone else has said is good. So I want to kind of reset your mind on that for starters. And what I want to do is in this podcast kind of start thinking about resetting from scratch, starting our own belief systems, our own societal beliefs, our own social idealisms, our own good, our own bad, and classifying what's a positive and what's a negative so that we can actually go, do you know what? I know that this is the herd, this is the societal kind of acceptance, but from today onwards, I'm going to be living from my own beliefs. And some of you listeners have already got those, some of you got some deep set values and beliefs and you're really clear on that, but a majority of people don't. The majority of people don't have their own values, and they kind of, the ones when you're talking to them in conversation, they'll crop up and they'll say something that they've just spat off the tongue because they've heard it somewhere, or what they feel is the right thing to say. And again, the word right, what's wrong, and they're kind of just going along with someone else's beliefs. And what you do by doing that is you end up kind of just living your life run by someone else's beliefs without questioning it. And you lose you're no longer authentic. You lose your authenticity of yourself, and you no longer stand out. So how can you expect to go and live an inspired life and be free and independent if you're in this herd and you're not standing out and you're not authentic because you're living by someone else's injected values and opinions and beliefs and idealisms? So the first thing I want to do is talk about kind of the good and the bad, because one of the things I was talking to my son about yesterday is there's good and bad in everything, okay? It's how you perceive what's good and how you perceive what's bad. Now, any kind of event can happen to you, whether you've been punched in the face, or you've lost your job, or you've won the lottery, or you've just got married, or you've moved house. All of those things can be perceived to be good or can be perceived to be bad. And when you're perceiving it to be good, it simply means that you're blinded in that moment in time to the downsides or the equal downsides to what that thing might bring. Okay? Or it might be that you're blinded to the downsides or the perceived downsides, comparing it to a previous event. And I was talking to a guy on Instagram the other day via the messaging, and he was looking at getting into trading, and he was developing himself, and he kind of cropped up that he'd be worried about losing his job. And he said, I'm worried about losing my job. And I said, well, do you like your job? And he said, no, I hate it. So what's he worrying about? He hasn't taken the time to see the upsides to that drawback. Now, if you think that the thing that you're doing is bad or worse, quote unquote, then that's just because you're blind to the upsides compared to what you thought it would be. So just to give you an example, you might want to get a better car, okay? Now, let's just say that at the moment, your better is based on what other people have said is better and what you believe to be better based on other people's opinions, okay? So you're infatuated with this new car, you go and buy the new car, and when you get the car, you think it's better. Okay, so you go, yeah, this is so much better than my last car. Okay, what you don't realize, because you're blind to it, is there's going to be equal drawbacks to getting that car. Even though you don't believe it at the moment, you will find out over time that there's equal drawbacks to getting that car. So it might be that the fuel economy is different. It might be worse. It might cost you more in fuel. It might cost you less in fuel, but it might cost you more in insurance. It might cost you more in servicing. Okay, it might cost you more in tires and repairs. Then there's things like when you go to the supermarket and you park the car, you now have to park miles away from the entrance because you want to get it in an empty space, because the other car, you didn't care if people knocked as you got out the door. This car, you don't want to get scratched. You don't want people bumping the trolleys into your car, so you park right down the other end of the car park. Now you've got to walk half a mile to the entrance to get into the supermarket. Then there might be things like fear of theft or fear of hate and fear of jealousy. You buy this really, really nice car and you just sold your old Fiat Panda, and now you've got the kind of the Tesla or the Lambo even, right? Or a Mercedes or a BM, and you're parked there, and now all you worry about, your worry creeps in because you think someone's going to scratch it out of jealousy. Someone's going to talk about you, bitch about you. So you've got all of that to come. Then there's the drawback of your kids. You know, before you didn't mind if they got in the car and kind of left their school stuff and they ate the crumbs in the car and all the rest of it. Now you've got all of that to contend with. You don't want that in the new car, right? You've got to keep it clean and all of that. Same thing when you move house, right? You might move house because you think it's better. We've just recently moved house, okay? Now, why things can be better in certain aspects, you just have to understand there's equal drawbacks. So let me just give you an example here. We moved into this house. We moved from a nice house in an acre of land in a private wood We've now moved to a private farm. There's one other house that's occupied on the farm that's a little over the way there, but just that tiny bit of privacy that's gone now. Okay, so we moved to the house thinking it's a brand new house, it's all going to be better, but it's important that we see the drawbacks, okay, because there's going to be times where in the summer we might be in the garden and we won't have as much privacy as we had in the last house. There's going to be things like in this house, in the old house we had a dog flap, okay, so we could just go to sleep all night and the dogs could run out and go to the toilet and they wouldn't disturb us. Now we don't have a dog flap and we can't fit one because of the doors and everything. So now my wife's getting up in the night because the dog's waking them up because they want to go out for the toilet, and now it's disrupting the sleep, whereas before it wouldn't disrupt the sleep. Now, when we moved into the house, the office was perceived to be better, right? I've got a big office, which it is better in that way. I've got a lot more space. It's a lot more inspiring. The old office was enclosed and dark and kind of smaller. The old office made me more focused because I would shut myself in there and focus more. This office makes me more creative where I can think of new ideas, and I've got a nice view out onto the farm. Now, I wanted a stand-up desk because I didn't want to sit down, so I thought it'd be better to get a stand-up desk. I get a stand-up desk, yes, my fitness is going to go up. Why did I want the stand-up desk? So I could be inspired to look out on the farm, on the view. Then I needed a screen for my laptop because my eyes were straining. So I get a screen. What does the screen do? It blocks some of the view. So what I'm trying to get at is there's always good and bad in everything. And if you're infatuating with something and believing it's good just because someone else has said it's good or better, and you're just subordinating to that belief without doing your own analysis, then you're going to be let down, okay? And that's when you're going to start having these emotional swings. So what I'm talking about here is creating your own beliefs, your own good and bad, what you believe is good and bad, allowing yourself to be yourself and be authentic and go along life by your own beliefs, but also having that expectation of good and bad in everything. Even what you believe to be good and bad, just expect everything to be equal. There's going to be some benefits in some areas of your life to doing something, and then there's going to be drawbacks in other areas of your life of that same thing. Many of you listening are working on becoming traders, okay? I've already told you this story about when I became a trader. I thought it'd be all great and roses and all the rest of it, and it'd be the perfect life. You end up sitting there not doing a lot. Okay, you visit the fridge more, you put on weight, because if you're not that disciplined and you kind of start picking at the food, you're going to gain more weight, you're going to eat more, you're going to do less exercise. You're going to have no one around you because everyone's at work. Your kids are at school. Your eyes will suffer because you're staring at screens. So there's drawbacks to that. Okay, when you're infatuated with becoming a trader, it's probably because you're living by someone else's values at the moment and you're trying to escape. But unless you do this process and start from scratch and create your own good and bad and positive and negatives and beliefs and idealisms, you're still going to continue that journey, and you're going to be in these swings of happiness and then depression and happiness and then depression, and you're going to kind of get caught up in chasing something that's perfect that's never perfect. So in the meeting last night, one of the things that John said was, any event that happens to you, you choose to see more good than bad or more bad than good. And it's a decision. And there's always two sides to any event. Okay, so if you think it was good, then you're blind to the downsides. And if you think it was bad, you're blind to the upsides. And if you don't neutralize this, all it's going to create is fear in the future. And another thing John said is fear of the unknown is absolute rubbish. There is no fear of the unknown, because fear is only based on imagination of something that could happen. And it's your imagination that's creating the fear, and that could either be based on something you've read, something you've watched, something that's happened in the past, and it's not real. Fear is not real. It doesn't happen. A fear is something that's up to you to perceive. It's something that's not real. It's all based on perception. So the thing is this, we can only control our perceptions, our decisions, and our actions. Okay, so if something happens to you, how you perceive that thing is going to determine what you decide to do next, and then what you decide to do next is going to determine the actions you take. And you can control all of that. You can control all of those three things. What you can't control is somebody else's actions and somebody else's beliefs and somebody else's projections onto you of their beliefs and their idealisms. And when we talk about fear is actually a mechanism built into you to just highlight that you are actually over-exaggerating something that isn't real. Or you're exaggerating the downsides to something that you haven't seen the plus sides to. So just to kind of really wrap things up here, what I want to get at the message I want to get through on this particular episode as we're going into a new decade, a new year, if we're to live an inspired life, if we're to be independent and free, we have to start thinking about things from a universal standpoint and taking our own view on it, putting our own stamp on it and living by our own values. Because if we don't do that, we'll end up letting other people's values run us. We will inject their opinions and their beliefs and their idealisms into us, and we'll just be one of the herd. And there's no way that we're going to break away and live our own life and be who we want to be if we're on that path and we're not authentic to ourselves. So, little bit of a rant here because I was fired up from a meeting I had last night with John. So hopefully you got something from that. Hopefully it's shifted your mind in terms of the way you approach things, the way you view things, the way you make decisions around things. And it will make you a lot more balanced, a lot more neutral, a lot more poised, and a lot more masterful. So that's it for this episode, guys. If you're more interested in learning more in depth about this entire process and how to create an abundant, financially free life, you can go and apply for my Tears of Freedom program, which has had phenomenal results already. You can go to the link that's in this podcast below. And until next week, have a great rest of your day and weekend, and I'll see you then.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongreystone.com.